Welcome to our presentation on Myung-Ji Yang's article, The Rise of Gangnam Style Manufacturing the Urban Middle Class in Seoul, examining how the Gangnam area became the center of South Korea's middle class identity. Yang's main argument is that this middle class did not naturally emerge from economic growth. It was constructed. The state led massive urban projects south of the Han River, introduced apartment based housing, and promoted ownership policies that encouraged speculation. At the same time, residents developed cultural practices that turned those material advantages into a sense of moral and social superiority. Yang builds her argument by combining three analytical perspectives. First, capital led urbanization, where housing becomes a financial asset, following thinkers like David Harvey. Second, the developmental state model, showing how the authoritarian government used urban planning to demonstrate national modernization. Third, spatial exclusion and culture, drawing from Bourdieu and Li Zhang to explain how people reproduce class identity through lifestyle and space. For her method, Yang relies on a year of fieldwork and 30 interviews with first-generation Gangnam residents, supported by archival research from 1976 to 1996. So the study connects macro-level policy with everyday life in the city.
Gangnam's transformation didn't happen organically. It was engineered as one of South Korea's most ambitious state projects. The government under Park Chung-hee in the 1970s deliberately set out to build a model district that would represent Korea's rapid economic rise. Facing overcrowding in northern Seoul, the state expanded the city across the Han River, relocating key offices, transport terminals, and major roads to the south. Through this top-down control, the regime could build bridges, expressways, and subway lines almost overnight, connecting Gangnam to the heart of Seoul. But behind this impressive speed was an authoritarian logic of efficiency. Progress was prioritized over people. Farmers and working-class representatives were displaced while middle-class professionals were invited in. Gangnam became a living showcase of modernization, a space where urban planning and political power merged to manufacture a new, unequal vision of progress. So let's now talk about the urban space and the state power of Gangnam. In the early 1970s, Seoul was facing rapid industrialization and overcrowding north in the Han River. The Park Chung-hee government saw this as an opportunity for both logistical challenge and a political opportunity. Through massive urban development, the regime transformed Gangnam into a modern showcase of national progress. This is what Yang calls development urbanism, where the state used the city itself to display Korea's modern identity during the Cold War. Infrastructure projects like bridges, subways, expressways symbolically link modernity with national pride to physical space. But the transformation wasn't equal for everyone. The government specifically encouraged educated, white-collar families to move south of the river, creating a physical and also a social divide between Gangnam and Gangbuk. Finally, the relocation of elite schools to Gangnam made education a central driver of migration. It became a magnet for ambitious middle-class families who viewed living there as an investment in their children's future. Essentially, Gangnam wasn't just built by concrete, it was built by state power, social aspiration, and spatial segregation. Once Gangnam's infrastructure was in place, homeownership became the key marker of middle-class success. Through government-subsidized apartment lotteries, many white-collar families could buy apartments below market value. And as the price rose, their property became their pathway to upward mobility. But these apartments represented more than just financial gain. These embodied a new cultural identity. Modern high-rises with elevators, hot water, and delivery service symbolize cultured, westernized living, a sharp contrast to the backward lifestyle of traditional Korean homes. Gangnam residents began performing the middle-class identity through their taste, manners, and education. They justified their wealth by cultivating what they saw as refined, civilized behavior, distinguishing themselves from those outside Gangnam. This lifestyle also reinforced inequality. Gated apartments and selective school districts that kept area exclusive, both socially and symbolically. In short, Gangnam became the visual and cultural embodiment of Korean middle class, a space where modernity, privilege, and aspiration all converged.
The state used Gangnam to showcase Korea's new middle class, a vision of modern life built through massive apartment projects, elite schools, and advanced infrastructure. Government housing programs didn't open doors for everyone. They favored the educated and employed. Yang explains that only government workers, professionals, and white collar families could apply for state sponsored home ownership, while low income families were completely excluded. Education also became the heart of this middle class dream. By 1985, 89% of residents were new movers, and high school enrollment had surged by 57.5%, showing how families were relocating just for education. As the district grew, so did its image. The media had turned Gangnam into a national symbol of success, showing luxury apartments, the rising wealth, and Western style living. But that image divided people. To some, it represented Korea's progress. To others, it was a corrupt symbol of unearned wealth, where only the salaried and educated could thrive. Yang shows that policies meant to modernize Seoul ended up creating clear winners. Government housing programs, first designed to promote development, quickly became tools for wealth accumulation, especially for white collar families who qualified for state sponsored home ownership. These were the people the state defined as modern citizens, and the benefits flowed directly to them. As Gangham's skyline grew, so did its reputation. The mass media portrayed Gangnam as the ultimate symbol of success, showcasing its luxury apartments, elite school, and Western style living. Yang explains that the mass media produce hegemonic images of Gangnam as a space of the rich, symbolized by upscale apartments and conspicuous consumption. These images create a widespread aspiration to live in Gangnam and endow Gangham's residents with symbolic power. Through this media image, Gangnam came to represent not just wealth, but the ideal modern life Koreans were told to chase. And by 2013, over half of Gangham's residents were professionals, white collar workers, and managers, with only 8% low income households, making it one of Seoul's most middle class districts. And while Gangnam stood as a symbol of national progress, it also deepened social division. Yang reminds us that before Gangnam, Seoul spaces were more mixed and not spatially divided by class. But state led development displaced rural, low income residents and concentrated privilege south of the river. What began as modernization ended up building boundaries, separating who could belong to Korea's modern future from those left behind. Gangnam's transformation was not accidental. It was engineered to represent Korea's modern future. The Korean Housing Corporation and chaebols built massive apartment complexes like Banpo and Jamsil, replacing farmland with rows of high-rise buildings. By 1985, nearly 73% of homes in Gangnam were apartments, compared to only 26% across Seoul. These new apartments had symbolized Western style living that were complete with elevators, heating, and even shopping facilities. At the same time, Gangnam also became an education hub. Elite schools like Kyungi, Huiman, and Seoul High relocated south, forming what became known as District 8. Several families moved in, hoping the quality of education would secure their children's future. To make this dream accessible, the government poured money into bridges, buses, subways, and expressways linking Gangnam to Seoul. Together, these apartments, schools, and highways didn't just modernize a city, they built a lifestyle, one that defined what it meant to live, learn, and succeed in modern Korea.
Now let's talk about how becoming an apartment owner in Gangnam wasn't just about housing. It was also about social status, class mobility, and even luck. This story is really the foundation of how South Korea's middle class was manufactured through both government policy and private speculation. It all started in 1977 when the Korean government launched an apartment lottery system to help salaried workers buy homes below market value. Sounds fair, right? But here's the catch. Only white collar families could actually afford the down payments and installments. So even though it was called a lottery, technically it really wasn't open to everyone. These apartments were also state priced, so winners instantly gained wealth. And imagine being able to buy a condo for half its real value today. That's huge. So the policy really looked progressive on the surface, but really created a selective gateway for the emerging middle class, especially civil servants, professionals, and corporate employees. Then, once people realized how profitable these lotteries were, things started getting wilder. Some lotteries had odds as high as 100 to 1, and families would register under multiple borrowed names to boost their chances. Apartment owners turned into ownership really turned into a new speculative game where people weren't just buying homes, they were investing in a dream of upward mobility. Throughout the article, the author calls this a system of inequality disguised as opportunity because the kind of system because this was like a kind of system where being inside or outside of Gangnam could really decide your financial future. Now, moving on to the more interesting part of this segment is when the housewives of South Korea really started, flipping apartments as their main source of income. Uh, Winners could sell their purchase rights from 2.2 to 17 million in Korean currency, while the average monthly income in 1970s were mostly around 140K, right? So one successful flip could earn, the housewives more than a year's salary, and that was considered normal. Um, in the article, the author also mentions about this one woman who doubled her money from 8 million to 16 million in just 6 months, which is like a huge gain, right? So it got the point where real estate profit became more reliable than a professional salary, and property flipping became a huge part of the real estate industry, and how the owners own their homes and real estate. Now, this section shows how apartment trading in Gangnam became more than just a financial activity, because it became a way of life for the middle class. Families no longer saw their homes as a permanent space anymore. Housing turned into a kind of financial instrument, where a tool which like acted like a tool for accumulating capital through constant buying and selling. In a 1982 survey, it found that 36.9% of households had already moved 3 to 4 times before settling, and 54.9% plan to move again. That tells us how deeply the idea of moving to move up was built into the culture. It wasn't just about finding a better home, it was also about chasing profit and status. By the late 1980s and 1990s, property values in Gangnam had quadrupled, and areas like Bampo became symbols of financial success. For many families, real estate replaced education or hard work as the most reliable way to climb into or stay in the middle class. So, what we are seeing is that mobility in Gangnam wasn't just physical, it was also social and economic. Owning and trading property became the core of middle class family in South Korea, setting the foundation for both prosperity and equality.
Yang shows that apartment living itself became a symbol of refinement and modernity. These large complexes represented a break from traditional crowded neighborhoods. Residents described apartment life as clean, safe, and orderly, proof that they were part of a new civilized society. Owning an apartment meant more than just housing. It expressed cultural capital, education, manners, and consumer taste. Yang calls these complexes factories of class, where middle class identity was continually produced and reinforced through everyday life. To stabilize their status, residents distinguished themselves from others, especially those who gained wealth through speculation or lived outside Gangnam. Interviewees like Miss Han and Miss Lee described Gangnam residents as polite, educated, and proper, contrasting them with so called uncivilized outsiders. This moral distinction was also physical. Gated entrances, guards, and limited interaction with public housing children kept communities socially and spatially closed. These boundaries turned cultural refinement into a justification for privilege, transforming speculative wealth into what appeared to be legitimate success. Yang concludes that the Gangnam middle class was not simply the result of industrialization or merit-based mobility. It was manufactured through deliberate state policy, speculative real estate systems, and everyday cultural performance. Apartment life gave residents both wealth and a language of civility that justified inequality. By linking property ownership with moral worth, Gangnam became a model for middle-class aspiration across Korea, and a lasting example of how urban space can produce class identity.
To wrap it all up, Gangnam's rise wasn't just a natural story of growth, but a manufactured creation of class. The South Korean government played a huge role in shaping who could enter this new middle class, mainly salaried professionals who had access to housing programs and steady income. Over time, apartments became the main symbol of success. They connected wealth, education, and lifestyle into one identity. But this success was built on speculative prosperity. People gained wealth not through labor or innovation, but through real estate profits. It blurred the moral line between effort and luck. To legitimize this sudden wealth, residents leaned into cultural refinement, education, civility, and modern tastes became tools to justify their privilege. Meanwhile, Gangnam's gated apartment design physically separated the rich from everyone else, turning geography itself into a symbol of class. So Gangnam stands as a dual symbol, a triumph of modernization, but also a remainder of exclusion and inequality. And this isn't unique to Korea. We see the same pattern in major metropolitans around the world, where real estate now defines class far more than income or profession. In the end, Yang's message is clear. Gangnam's story shows us that modernization and equality often grow hand in hand, and it challenges us to rethink what truly counts as progress. When we reflect on Gangnam's story, it's not just about one neighborhood, it's about a pattern that we see globally. Yang shows us that Gangnam's middle class wasn't built through hard work or innovation, but through property ownership and speculation supported by state policy. And that's a really important idea, that modernization and equality can coexist within the same system. If we think about this in today's context, the same thing is happening in major metropolitans across the globe, like Toronto, London, Shanghai, where owning a home often defines whether you belong to the middle class or not. We see young people working full time but unable to afford homes, while property owners gain wealth by just holding real estate. It's the same cycle that Yang described, inequality being manufactured under the appearance of progress. This reflection pushes us to question how we define success. If class mobility today depends on when and where you bought property rather than on effort or skill, then we really have to ask, can this kind of success ever be called legitimate? So Gangnam isn't just a case study in South Korea's past, it's a mirror of our global present. It makes us think about how speculation and inequality are shaping our own cities and our own definition of what it means to be middle class.
This article by Myung-Ji Yang discusses a couple of common topics which are related to readings from the past weeks that we had. One of the topics is consumption and social class boundaries, and it is deeply linked in the formation of South Korea's urban middle class, focusing on Gangnam between 1976 and 1996. Yang shows that middle class identity was expressed through taste, lifestyle, and globalized experiences. This theme connects to Yoon Jang Kang's work on postpartum care, where luxury services signal class status. Broader essays from Korean culture and society reinforce that urban Korea is highly status conscious, with goods like education, real estate, and media influences, such as Gangnam Style, shaping social boundaries. Overall, these readings demonstrate how consumption is central to class identity in Korea today. Now turning to the second common theme, education, family, and social mobility. Yang explains how relocating elite schools to Gangnam turned the district into an education hub, driving up housing demand and tying academic success to where people could afford to live. This made geography itself a privilege, amplifying inequality within Korea's so called meritocracy. Korean culture and society refers to this as education fever, where families pour resources into schools and private tutoring, but access still remains unequal and heavily dependent on class. Kang adds that parental, especially maternal, investment in education is central to maintaining middle class status, even at emotional and financial cost. So rather than being a ladder of mobility, education in Korea often reinforces privilege. Where you live, how much you can spend, and what schools you access still determine who gets ahead. This external article, From an Empty Land to the Symbol of Wealth, The History of Gangnam Style Development in Seoul by Dongjin Kim, focuses on the full historical formation of Gangnam, from its incorporation into Seoul in 1963 to its present day status as South Korea's financial and cultural hub. It explains that Gangnam's growth was driven by rapid post war urbanization, government expansion projects, and its strategic location south of the Han River for security reasons. Unlike Yan's article, which analyzes only the 1976 to 1996 period of class formation and middle class identity, this piece provides a broader historical and urban development perspective, showing how Gangnam evolved from farmland to the ultimate symbol of wealth in Seoul. For the discussion questions, we have the following. The first one is Gangnam became a status symbol of modern urban living through architecture, education, and consumption. How do similar urban spaces like Manhattan, London's Canary Wharf, or Dubai construct and export middle class dreams? Are these aspirational narratives more about national pride or personal success? The second one is Gangnam Style turned a local symbol of privilege into a global cultural product. Do you think popular culture today, like music or film, can still critique inequality effectively, or has satire itself become another form of luxury consumption? And that wraps up our presentation. Thank you so much for watching.